computer. Hmm. Okay. So, let me just start with the brief introduction. Hi, I am your interviewer, Jiyoung. I'm from Monash Uni, and thank you for taking time to participate in this interview. And this interview will last around 30 minutes and will focus on your experiences with the networking event. And before we begin, I'd like to remind you of a few things that your name will be anonymized, and you may choose to turn off your camera and your mic. You may, if you wish, you could um, type out what you want to say, and then please use your participant code instead of your real name. If any information slipped out, it'll be edited to anonymized, and the interview will be recorded for transcription purposes only. During the interview, you have the right to ask for a pause the interview at any time without any penalty. You can ask to delete all your information collected whenever, and it will be done immediately. And your responses will remain confidential and will be used for this research only. And you may ask questions whenever you have, both during and after the interview. Um, Lastly, do you consent to continue with this interview?
Yes, yes, I do.
Thank you. All right. Let me just start with if you still remember about our networking event, I would like to ask you, how did you feel, how you felt about when using Cluster to chat with other students?
Yeah, no, I do remember. I thought it was a good tool. It seemed relatively intuitive, and obviously before we used it, we had a fair bit of training in terms of, PDFs and things that were sent around. Um, yeah, I guess it was a useful tool for collaboration and breaking out into smaller clusters and discussing things.
Mm. So did you feel, do you mean you felt positive about using this software to communicate with others?
I think overall positive, yes. Yeah, we were well prepared for how it works in terms of again, the training material. I think if I had gone into it without that material, I was just chucked into a cluster and told to find my own way, I think it might have been a little bit more confusing.
All right. Um, were there any differences on how you would normally feel in real life when you're communicating with others?
Uh, I mean, Cluster was really just a Zoom app with a few other functions around breakouts. In that respect, I guess it feels like any Zoom, which is, it feels close to real life, but real life has more, I guess, physical interactions. It's more personal. Um, it's good for what it is, absolutely. And the one nice thing though is you can break into other clusters very easily, whereas in real life, if there's groups of three or four people and you're trying to break out of that group into another group that's standing adjacent, that's a lot more awkward, generally speaking, to kind of leave the existing group and to randomly join a new group and work out what's going on. In real life, it takes a bit of skill, whereas I think in the cluster, it's a lot easier to just drop out and pop in.
Hmm. And did you feel all those conversations, your overall experience still pretty natural?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to be fair, we also initially spoke with people we already knew. So it was quite easy to kickstart the conversation and talk about random things like food and other topics. Um, so it felt, I guess, as natural as a Zoom call, I would say.
Hmm. All right. Were there any were there any similarities that you felt, oh, this is very much similar um, to having a conversation in real life and with your experience in cluster?
Um, Again, as far as a digital product goes, I think it was good. You know, the fact that you can be in a massive group to start with,
Mm,
and then you can break that down into a smaller group. Um, and then from there, even break down further into just a one-on-one conversation. You know, that was quite a clever thing that I guess Zoom doesn't have, as far as I know. You can break into clusters, but it doesn't get to that granularity. Um, so I guess real life mirrors that, or the other way around, really. You know, like you can be in a big group and then break into a smaller subset and then maybe have a one-on-one discussion with
mm,
just, a certain person or two. Um, so yeah, I guess in short, it probably does mirror it as far as it can from a digital perspective, short of going into full-on VR, AR kind of products.
mm. Have you faced any difficulties then? Because it sounds like that feature that Cluster had was pretty helpful for you to engage in a conversation. So would you feel that it might be better to use Cluster than to just have a face-to-face conversation when it comes to events, especially events like this?
Um, Face to face with one person, I'd say it's no different to Zoom. And I would still prefer real life for face to face, actual one-on-one. Having said that, for a larger group where again you want to break out and potentially break out again, I think it's quite a unique product. And if the user interface was maybe just a tiny bit cleaner, it's not bad, but if it was just a little more polished, I'd probably use it as a main tool. Yeah.
Okay. Now that you mentioned about the user interface, could we talk a little more about that? Um, yeah, so did you find Cluster the overall design? How would you find the overall interface design on Cluster?
Yeah. I mean, to be very fair, I'll state this up front. I don't think Zoom's got a very nice interface design either. I think it's functional, and once you know where everything is, it's fine, but it's not, it's not Canva.
Hmm,
Um, so with that kind of context, I'd say clusters maybe 70% there, 80% maybe even.
hmm,
Um, it looks visually, I'd say, okay. It doesn't look completely home built, but it also doesn't look like something Apple would put out. So that's something that can be easily iterated upon. I think the one thing I did notice was, again, we had a lot of training materials, and therefore we kind of knew that there was this effectively inception of going deeper and deeper, as you meet with fewer and fewer people. But if you didn't have that pre-training, I think it would have been confusing from a user interface perspective to do that. I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like there might have been a better way to handle the kind of the depth progression and the, coming back out of the depth.
hmm. So, if I put it in other words, you found it easy to use just because you had in previous instruction. Otherwise, you might have been confused with what's what, and like.
I think that's a fair summary. Again, you could click around and I'm sure you could figure out your way after, 5 or so minutes. But I think it was a lot easier because we had the instructions and it showed pictures of what it's all about and that you can go kind of, you know, main group into subgroup into individual. Um, to be fair to it again, though, I think Zoom hasn't got a good interface, and I still sometimes hunt around for features and options in Zoom, and I've used it many times. So maybe it's just a case of learning the product.
Hmm, I see. Um, Even with the instructions, were there anything else that it was confusing for you to use?
Um, no, I think with the instructions, I think it was fairly good to use. Yeah.
Okay. Then have you experienced any technical problems?
No, so everything worked smoothly as far as I recall. I was able to log in and there was no glitches or anything.
Hmm. I see. Then um, could I ask you about since I can tell that you kind of feel both some like positive, like have some positive views and somewhat not so positive, but what part of the interface did you like the most if you were to focus on positive things?
You have to try and picture it again now. Uh, I think at a high level, kind of seeing the various people in one big block um, was good. It was sort of uh, yeah, it was intuitive, I guess, who you're in the room with. Um, and the sizing was quite good. You could sort of see a little bit of everything. And again, the ability to jump out into a private chat and this was actually quite interesting and still hear the rest of the conversation. So, you're in a group of eight, two of you drop into a private chat. They can't hear you, but you can still hear the other six people. I thought that was quite a cool feature. So you don't sort of feel like you're missing out on what's going on in the main room. But you could turn it down as well. So you could, if it was distracting you, you could turn it off. So I thought that was a particularly good, natural kind of thing to do.
Other than video conferencing features, Cluster also had this section where you type in your about your hobbies, your interests, your skills, your background. So this again, because you mentioned about Zoom and the differences, do you think those type of features, sections, helps you to understand or like navigate the conversation?
I think for our specific task, it was in hindsight very helpful. Yeah. Um, I have to admit I didn't initially realize quite the extent of the use of that little bio. Um, I thought it was more, I guess, generic, here's my name, here's kind of what I'm into, here's maybe some of my core skills, here's maybe some languages, like at a very high level, but I didn't realize that people would effectively kind of read your bio and then pick the conversations based purely on that. I thought it was still very much an open event.
Mm. Then, are you saying that you felt that wasn't that important for cluster?
Uh, well, I think for our event, in terms of university and what we had to do in that event, I think it was actually very important. Um, but yeah, I probably wasn't aware of its importance until I was in the cluster and actually I changed my bio a little bit whilst in the cluster.
Mm, I see. Um, then what part of the interface was the most unlikable for you, if there is?
Um, um, I mean, there was nothing that was truly bad that just stood out as being, a horrendous thing I'd need to change immediately. Again, I don't think the necessarily the visual look was hyper appealing to me personally in terms of colors and again, I thought the layout in terms of how you go deeper and how you come back out of that depth was maybe a little bit confusing.
Mm,
Um, there's also a lot going on when you first jump in. There's a lot of buttons and knobs and tweaks, which is probably a useful thing, but when you first get into it, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Um, But once you know how the product works and you're sort of familiar with its core function of diving in and pulling out, I think I'd say it was relatively good overall.
Mm. So if you were to improve something, were those are going to be on your list for areas of improvement?
Yeah, they're definitely the top two. I mean, the login process and that sort of thing could probably be smoothed out, but that's just a very traditional sort of thing. But once you're in the system, I think maybe hiding some of the options you don't need to use all the time a little more would be good. So there's not quite as much visual stuff
Mm,
um, until you need it. And again, somehow there might be a better way for how you dive in and how you pull out of a cluster. I don't know what it is. I'd have to think about it more and probably sketch it on a piece of paper. But right now, it just feels a little hacky. I don't know.
right. So you would prefer something more simple and neat, if that's the right word.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in my mind, if I'm thinking how Apple would do it, they would hide a lot of that stuff away. All the extra volume sliders, this, that, and the next thing, and probably really make it focus on the visuals, on the videos.
Hmm.
Whereas this had, I'd say, generally smaller videos, and there's a lot of stuff in general. There's kind of boxes everywhere. Um, and the other thing that, again, once I realized how important it was with the bio, it was a bit of a pain actually to walk to read everybody's bio. You had to kind of hover over their names in a box and there wasn't sort of an easy way to sort of scan who's in all the conversations and what their bios are without having to click into each one.
Hmm.
Well, I think it wasn't click, I think it was just a hover. But, if you had 30 people to try and read all the bios, I mean, it was a real pain to go from person to person and hover. And then sometimes they've moved from a certain, they were in one chat and they moved to another chat. And so now all of a sudden, their bios effectively moved and you have to try and figure out what's something you've not read yet. Yeah.
All right. Um, and lastly, for the interface, is there something that you wish there was? If is there something if you could add a new feature, what would you want?
Um, um, Nothing really comes to mind in terms of extra features other than kind of maybe rearranging the current features and like I said, hiding certain things and just making it a little more obvious about the way you zoom into a group and out of a group. Um, no, I think there's nothing else you should add at this point. Zoom doesn't really have many features either, if you think about it.
So rather than adding a new feature, you would just prefer to get it more polished, more improved.
Yeah, I think that's logical. I mean, its sort of main differentiator from something like Zoom is clearly that you can break out more easily, and then from those breakouts go into even more, one-on-one breakouts. Um, I see that as its differentiating factor, and I don't think there's anything else needed to really put on top.
Mm, okay, I see. Well, thank you for your answers. Lastly, I want to move on to the task completion. Um, could you briefly describe what your main task for this event was?
Yeah, so e- effectively, it was to learn how to use Cluster, to be familiar with it, to get experience with it, and also to meet some people to potentially join together in assignment two.
Hmm. And do you think you did well to complete your task?
I mean, yes, I think I didn't meet quite as many new people as I probably should. Um, but luckily for us in class, we already have quite a large group of people that we know. So we did interact a lot with them and we shared the codes and coordinated everything afterwards on WhatsApp as well. So I think it was successful in terms of having people to put down. In hindsight, I probably would have focused a little more on my own bio for those skills and maybe hunted a little more around the different groups for certain skills as well. But yeah, I think it worked out well overall.
I see. Then is there something particularly you did for yourself to accomplish this task, or let's say to better communicate with others?
Um, doesn't really relate to Cluster itself, but I did set up a sort of a WhatsApp to communicate amongst, you know, a subgroup of people and share codes and do that sort of thing. Because within Cluster in that time, it um, wasn't really suitable to share that sort of information.
Mm,
So it was good to get that set up for afterwards and then hash out any finer details around who may be the best skill for certain roles.
I see. And then what were the challenges that made it difficult to complete your task?
Um, I would say it was okay. There wasn't any particular challenges that were unexpected.
Okay, I see. Then, um, if you had the same task and you had to give that task to someone else, would
Mhm.
you recommend that person to use Cluster, or would you do it on Cluster again?
H- Hang on, cluster or cluster? What was the?
Cluster. So, if you had the same task that you have to do it again, would you
Mhm.
repeat that? Would you do go through all of this again on Cluster and probably recommend using Cluster to any other people?
Uh, I think so. Yes, I think it works better for that specific use case than Zoom would. You know. Um, Again, I think there needed to be maybe a little more um, condensed and specific information around, bios and really kind of the task description before going into cluster. I think most people in the cluster initially thought we're just here to try it out and see what all the buttons do and, have a bit of a play.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people only halfway through kind of realized, hang on a minute, seems like we're supposed to be actually, you know, really interrogating each other for skill sets and roles and potential team ups.
mm. All right. Then do you think it would have been easier if you have done that offline, face to face in real life?
Um, no, I think actually through cluster was quite good because you could jump into different rooms and meet random people or have random people jump into your room,
Mm,
which quite frankly probably wouldn't have happened in real life.
mhm. I see. I'm sorry. Let me just. Mm. I think it's. I want to ask something a little similar, but a bit different. So what do you think might have happened if this networking event was held offline,
Um, you mean just an in-person?
in person?
Yeah.
So I asked you about like how would you based on your experience, do you think like which one would be better? But I'm asking you about like a hypothesis, like a if you were to imagine, oh, like if the same thing has happened offline, would there
Mhm.
be what would have might have happened? Would there be a difference or any y- your thoughts?
Mm. Um, I I think there would have been a difference, maybe positive and negative. I think the positive about in person again is that it's just a little more maybe engaging, like being on Zoom or any sort of video call, it's never quite, for me at least, it's not as engaging, like I think mentally you're not as stimulated. There's not as much information that you're absorbing in terms of your surroundings and, specific things. Maybe you're a little more um I don't know, friendly and engaging, I think, in person as well, Um, so that's the positive of doing it in person. That would have been better, a lot more personal. And in the old world, before you had a million assignments, it may also lead to eventually having coffees together or, a drink or something and build a bit more of a lasting relationship. But the downside in person would be it's very, very easy to go in a room and then probably stick to your small group of people that you're talking to, your five, six people, whatever, and pretty much never leave that group. And it's very hard for someone to break into that group and vice versa. It's sometimes awkward to leave the group, you know. Um, some people have a really good skill of how they kind of slowly exit a group and smoothly enter a group, and others, the social skills are maybe a little different. Um, so I think for the type of people that we are and the amount of people that we are, it would have been very difficult to do it in person and have the same outcome, especially around bouncing around different rooms and meeting, new people. I think that probably wouldn't have happened in real life. Yeah.
See. All right. I think it's about time that we wrap up. Is there any question? Again, those are all the questions that I wanted to ask you. Um, Now, do you have any other questions that you want to ask me or about cluster or anything what's going to happen?
Yeah. So what are you guys looking to do with it? Where's the product at in terms of the stage of development? Are
Hmm.
you guys looking at releasing it more widely or just using it within university?
Well, it's not something that I could answer. But I imagine that maybe since it's still a prototype, um, the developers might work on the areas of improvement, um, look into feedbacks, and maybe work on it more or drop that project. Could be multiple multiple scenarios. I'm sorry I couldn't answer. It's just
That's fine.
assumptions.
That's fine. But yeah, it seems like a promising start anyway. It seems like something that could be commercialized potentially.
Mm. Right. Any other questions other than that?
No, nothing else from my side. Thank
Mm.
you.
Okay. Yeah, it's almost time that we started this interview 28 minutes ago, and yeah, I just want to um, thank you for all for your precious time. And yeah, if you have any more following up questions or any inquiries or any um, anything that you need, or if you have changed your mind that we want us to delete all your personal information, please reach out and we will get back to you very soon.
No problem. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity and good luck with the product development.
Thank you. All right, I'll see you later then.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.